Yo, what's up guys, AFC Dino here and welcome to a new video. In this video we are going to do a little team preview of our team for the road to top 50. For the people who watch me on Twitch, they already know I already achieved that goal. At the moment we are preparing for the road to top 10. Last time we ended off last stream on rank 23. I think we dropped a bit because everyday people are playing, so usually you get overtaken. But yeah, the road to top 50 is going to be on YouTube soon, but I'll publish this video first. If you're watching it on Patreon, you already have early access because and you probably have seen this video already, as I do publish these kind of things. Usually I give my patrons early access. So if you are interested in this kind of stuff and you'd like to support me a bit more, you can check out my Patreon. And for about $1.50, you'll be supporting me extra, but you'll get early access to my teams, to guide videos, to team building videos. So just check it out, the link is in the description. But for now guys, this is the team that we'll be using for the road to top 50 and essentially for the road to top 10. Initially guys, I was planning on using a different team, but I didn't really like the team, wasn't really comfortable with the team. So I had like just before I started doing the road to top 50, I decided to build a team real quickly with what I had available. And I came up with this, and it had been working pretty well for me. I felt really comfortable using it. A lot of people were excited to use it as well, but yeah, I didn't publish the Pokepage yet because the road to top 50 was not online on YouTube yet. Only my patrons again had access to it. But yeah, we'll go over the team, why we go for certain movesets, why the Pokemon are in this team, and yeah, explaining EVs and stuff as well. So buckle up guys, because we're in for a ride. So first off guys, we have Mienshao. Mienshao is our physical wall breaker slash stall breaker, because with Taunt it can stop certain Pokemon from recovering up, and with Toxic it can cripple walls it could otherwise not beat, like Jellicent, Hippowdon, those kind of Pokemon. And yeah, next to a wall breaker, it's usually really nice to have a sweeper. So we have Mienshao as our heavy hitter, then we have Scizor as our sweeper. Basically the idea is cripple as many walls as possible with Mienshao, whether it be through pure damage from close combat or weakening it with Toxic and U-turn. Because the idea with this Scizor set is basically we pivot around early with U-turn, weakening stuff, and preparing for, if possible, late game bullet punch sweep after a Swords Dance. But for this to be possible, we usually need to get rid of the bullet punch resistances like Jellicent, Rotom, those kind of Pokemon. Or Pokemon that could take on Scizor at +2 like Hippowdon and just roar him out. That's why Mienshao is really important. But early game we usually don't try to sweep yet, we just U-turn around. And yeah, the Mienshao pretty much has a normal EV spread. We put the 4 remaining EV points into special defense in case we need to tank like a Scald or something, or Hex once we go for the Taunt Toxic. But Scizor's EV spread, we have max attacks with an adamant nature to just get strong hits off. We go with 228 speed. This allows us to outspeed max speed adamant Tyranitar in case you're facing an adamant choice banded Tyranitar with max speed. You'll be able to outspeed it and go for a U-turn instead of bullet punch, because when they're full HP, boosted bullet punch is obviously not gonna kill. And we put the remaining points into defense, helps us 1v1ing things like Choice Banded Scizor, because we are usually outspeeding other opposing Scizors. And with Roost, we can basically beat Choice Banded Scizor, because if they lock themselves into A Bullet Punch we can set up on them. If they lock themselves into Superpower, we can Roost before they get the hit off, and then Roost again once their attack drops. And it's basically that. I really like the leftovers on Scizor as well over Life Orb or Iron Blade or Metal Coat, because a lot of Pokemon in this game run Rocky Helmet, be it Mandibuzz, be it Hippowdon, be it Salamence. And with Stealth Rock up as well, if you're trying to U-turn around, you'll easily get chipped down, and leftovers just helps us staying a bit healthier with the longevity. And together with Roost, we can we have a much easier time setting up as well, because we have some extra recovery. Scizor can usually set up on things like Chansey, Ferrothorn as well, and get a strong U-turn off. Just passive Pokemon that don't really touch it. The Steel type is just really amazing against defensive Pokemon, and the Bug type allows us to not get a super effective hit against us from Earthquake. But that's basically it about Scizor. This speed allows us, by the way, also to outspeed most Rotom Washes that are defensive or especially defensive. You usually have to check though who takes leftovers recovery first, and if you take it first, then you're most likely outspeeding, and then you can get a U-turn off. And if you set up a Sword Stance on a Rotom switch, then you get even a stronger U-turn off. So I really like it. Next up we have Hippowdon as our Stealth Rocker. Hippowdon is just a solid Stealth Rock. It's electric immunity, stopping things like Volt Switch from Magnezone, Magnezone is a threat to Scizor. Having that ground up is really nice, but also maybe outplaying Choice Scarf Rotoms in case they try to go for Volt Switch. But also helping us against physical attackers like Conkeldurr, Mienshao, physical offensive Infernape, Scizor. Scizor, by the way, is the reason we run Fire Fang. Toxic is also an option, but if you run into a Sword Stance Scizor with this team, then you might just lose, because later on we do have a Haze Dragonite, but if the Scizor is at +2, Dragonite might not be able to haze in time. So Hippowdon can come in on Scizor, and doesn't really matter. If it's Choice Bandit, it's still the same thing. It's gonna take Rocky Helmet damage. We slack off any damage. And if it's Sword Stance, we don't die to a +2 Scizor, and we can hit it with Fire Fang for 4 times super effective damage, most of the time killing, and if we don't kill, they will usually die to our Rocky Helmet. So basically Hippowdon, it does mean we miss Roar. So if we face something like a Levitate user or a Flying type, and we don't have Toxic or Roar, it can be troublesome for Hippowdon. That's why we have a Porygon 2, but we'll talk about that later. First, let's go over Rotom, because Rotom is gonna be our water resist of the team, and it's especially defensive Rotom. I chose it with 29 speed, ideally. It's not necessary, but 29 speed means that we have 1 speed stat lower than uninvested speed Rotoms. So if you're facing another Bolt or Calm Rotom, you usually be slower, which gives you the momentum with Volt Switch, because usually you would like to Volt Switch after them. Let them Volt Switch first and then you Volt Switch. That way you gain a lot of momentum, get a free switch. And usually if they switch into a ground type, they have to fear Hydro Pump from Rotom, like Hippowdon or Gliscor. So even if they do try to make that outplay, they're not out of the woods yet, because you can just hit them with Hydro Pump. So it's basically it. Mainly our switch for things like Gengar. A lot of Gengars are substitutes, so you can bring this in on Gengar. You don't get 2-hit KO'd by Shadow Ball. They're usually Black Sludge as well. You can come in, if they sub, you Volt Switch, break their sub, maybe get in Scizor. If they Nasty Plot, you get a strong Volt Switch off on them, which puts them in range of Bullet Punch Scizor. Also, kind of our check to Rain teams, because Rain teams usually don't like switching into Rotom, because he resists their attacks with water, with the water typing, and super effective damage with Volt Switch. If you're facing a Kingdra, keep Rotom at 100% if possible, because it can live a Draco, cannot live the next one, but if they'll be locked in, so you have to outplay that. But as long as you have Rotom at full HP, you can always play around things like Kingdra. And if they go for a Hydro Pump or Surf, you don't even get 2-hit KO'd with the leftovers recovery, as long as you're full HP, or close to full HP at least. But that's basically the Rotom. It's also a nice, with Levitate, a nice Earthquake immunity. Yeah, now we have Porygon 2, because like we mentioned earlier, Hippowdon doesn't have Toxic or Roar, so it becomes skeptical to things like Dragon Dance, Dragonite, Gyarados, because we cannot touch them, Dragonite, Salamence, and Porygon 2 is one of the best counters to them. Porygon 2 with Trace will trace the Intimidate from Salamence and Gyarados, lowering their attack, and basically hitting them either with a super effective Ice Beam, or in Gyarados' case, a super effective Discharge. I chose Discharge over Thunderbolt because we run Teleport on Porygon 2, so we don't have any status moves on him. Discharge has a pretty high chance, 30% to Paralyze, which could sometimes be helpful. So we sacrifice a bit of damage for the chance of paralyzing. You mainly want to hit Gyarados with the Discharge anyway, which is 4 times super effective. It doesn't kill him though, but Gyarados won't 2-hit KO you if you trace the Intimidate. And yeah, Teleport, just gaining ourselves momentum. It can also switch into things like Chansey and Blissey on the Toxic. And then Teleport, we run the Relaxed nature instead of Bolt, just to get slower teleports off than things like Chansey and Blissey or other teleport users. And yeah, gain the momentum. And if we trace their natural cure, then we get rid of the Toxic as well, which is nice. Hydreigon is also a big problem because Hippowdon doesn't really do anything to it. Rotom doesn't really touch Hydreigon either. Porygon 2 can take Hydreigon on. It usually doesn't get 2-hit KO'd by either Focus Blast or Superpower, so it avoids the 2-hit KO. Make sure you don't get tricked on though if you face something like that. If you need Porygon at game, don't let it get tricked on. Don't switch it into Rotom Mow or to an opposing Rotom Wash if you don't know if they're Choice Scarfed yet. Because in that, if Porygon 2 needs to wall something, it needs its Eviolite. And let me explain the EV spread of this as well. Max HP, 148 points into defense. This allows us guys to avoid the 2-hit KO from Life Orb Garchomp when they have Stealth Rock up and Sand up. Because you usually have Sand up because you have Hippowdon on your team, and if they have Stealth Rock up, you want to avoid a 2-hit KO from a Life Orb Earthquake. And Porygon 2 at full HP does exactly that with this amount of EVs. So I can show you the calc as well. Porygon 2, and let's say Garchomp. So we put him at level 50. So you see Earthquake does 32.3 to 39. It's a guaranteed 2-hit KO, 3-hit KO. But let's say if they have Stealth Rock up plus Sandstorm, it's still not a 2-hit KO. And if I put it at 144, suddenly there's a chance to get 2-hit KO'd. So we just, even though it's a really low chance, a 0.4% is basically not gonna happen. But not taking any chances, 148, and we put the rest into special defense, just like I said, to take on things like Hydreigon, but also Starmie, for example, which usually runs Psyshock, but you avoid the 2-hit KO from Surf as well. So it's a really nice mixed wall, but mainly checking physical attackers like Gyarados, Salamence, and Dragonite, and Garchomp. And lastly, guys, we have especially defensive Dragonite. I chose to go for a Calm nature over Careful, just because if you look at Conkeldurr, guys, we only have Hippowdon, But if the Conkeldurr is actually bulk up, without Roar, we can be in a lot of trouble because it can easily beat down Hippowdon if it just bulks up. Because Earthquake is not going to do much because it's going to raise his defense as well. So we want to have a super effective move to hit Conkeldurr. I chose Air Slash over Hurricane just because of the accuracy. We don't want to miss in that situation. So an Air Slash is going to do quite a bit. Let me show you guys a Calc as well versus Conkeldurr. This is level 50. This is without HP, but they're usually like max HP. Still do like over 56%, and even if they are, you still do over 40% if they max HP and special defense. So you still do a lot of damage, but they're usually max attack and like max HP. So Air Slash does a significant amount of damage because they usually run Rock Blast. So let's say if I were to go for Dragon Claw or Air Slash, if they are a bulk up set, I'm not gonna do much damage with Dragonite. So I prefer just having the Air Slash, an extra check to Conkeldurr as well. Because if Conkeldurr sets up a bulk up, Mienshao is gonna die to Mach Punch. Scizor cannot beat it, and it's gonna heal all the damage back with Drain Punch. Same for Rotom, and Porygon 2 obviously has nothing to do against a Conkeldurr either. So just having that extra check. And against fighting types in general, because pretty much every team has a fighting type, almost every team. So Air Slash is a good option to have. We have Haze, stopping things like Reuniclus and Volcarona, which a lot of teams could struggle against, but not with this guy. I played it a bunch of times, and when reaching rank 23, guys, I never had trouble with a Reuniclus or Volcarona having this Dragonite. So if you're facing Volcarona or Reuniclus or another setup sweeper that Dragonite needs to stop, make sure to not switch it into a potential Choice Scarf users like Chandelure, any Rotom, because you don't want to get the Choice Scarf in that situation. We have Heal Bell as well, basically supporting the mainly supporting the Mienshao, because Mienshao, with Heal Bell, Mienshao doesn't have to click, sometimes doesn't have to click Taunt on unpredicted Toxic or Will-O-Wisp. Because if, let's say Mienshao versus Cofagrigus or versus Jellicent, if they go for Will-O-Wisp and you go for Toxic, then that trade is good for you, even though Mienshao gets burned because Dragonite can Heal Bell it later on anyway. And by the way, having this Dragonite is also nice versus Breloom, because if Breloom is not running a Rock type attack, which they aren't most of the times, usually they only run something like Drain Punch or Focus Punch. Sometimes they even run a Grass type attack, and Dragonite just sits there. Make sure Dragonite is not the one that gets spoiled though. In that case, it's probably better to let something useless be asleep, depending on the game. Often it can just be Scizor, because you can always Heal Bell it later on. But yeah, Heal Bell really nice, and obviously Roost for longevity, recovery, alongside leftovers. And that's basically the team, guys. We run 20 speed on Dragonite just to outspeed a lot of variants of Spadef, Breloom, Milotic as well. Outspeeding Milotic is usually a good speed tier. Because a lot of Pokemon, defensive Pokemon, are below that speed tier, and just being able to Roost before Milotic throws off an Ice Beam or something after you got it poisoned with Mienshao could be nice. Being able to Air Slash them before they can touch you, maybe get the flinch chance, those kind of things. I just run 20 speed. And yeah, 244 HP, having an odd number on HP, meaning that we take reduced damage from Stealth Rock damage, because the damage gets rounded down, and then put every point into special defense just to take on special attacks as good as possible. And with that extra special defense, also living certain HP ices that's at random points, which could be nice as well. because Dragonite is really bulky. Now let's actually go over a few important Calcs, guys, because there are definitely a few Calcs you guys need to know. Mainly for Mienshao, because Mienshao is basically one of the most important members getting you to victory, because Mienshao is gonna take care of the walls, and it usually outspeeds Garchomp as well. The Garchomp tier, yeah. The first and most important Calc is Hippowdon. So when do you 2-hit KO Hippowdon? And we'll just assume Hippowdon is max HP, max defense. So the minimal damage at level 50 is 40% and the maximum is 46.9. So let's say if the Hippowdon is 80%, then it's a guaranteed 2-hit KO. But let's say if Hippowdon is 81%, then it's a 95.3, which is still really high. 82, still pretty high. 83, it becomes an 84.4, that's still pretty high. 84, it becomes a bit lower, but it's still over 75%. And at 85, 62.5 is already a bit lower. And yeah, at 86, oh, at 86, guys, it becomes like a 50-50, which is going to become a bit more risky. And at 87, yeah, then the odds are in your opponent's favor. So just be mindful. If the Hippowdon is below 80%, then definitely go for close combat. If you expect Hippowdon to come in, don't have to predict there. And vice versa as well. The Earthquake from Hippowdon, guys. The Earthquake from Hippowdon does a maximum of 80%. So if you're full HP and you're in against a Hippowdon, I usually wouldn't go for Taunt predicting Stealth Rock. I just go just going immediately for the Toxic and Poisoning Hippowdon, because if Hippowdon then is poisoned and comes in on close combat, it's just gonna take extra damage, and that makes it easier to 2-hit KO. And we have a Rotom, which will easily defog on any Hippowdon. It can always defog on Hippowdon basically, so we don't have to worry there too much about rocks. Another important call, guys, is versus Skarmory. So let's assume Skarmory is max HP, max defense. So at level 50, close combat does 43.6 to 52.3%. So you have like a 13% chance to knock it to hit KO, which is still pretty low. But let's say you get rocks up, it suddenly becomes an 98.4% chance, but basically a 100% chance to knock out Skarmory from full HP if you have rocks up. So in that situation, if you have rocks up and there only switches Skarmory, just going for close combat and not even predicting Skarmory on a double switch is usually the play. Another important call, guys. Rotom Wash. Let's assume Rotom Wash is max defense. $57.3 is the minimal you do, 68.1 is the maximum. So it's basically always a 2-hit KO. But it's up to you to decide whether the Rotom is physical defensive or specially defensive or even offensive. And usually, if you get damage off on Rotom with anything, like with the Volt Switch from your Rotom maybe, with the U-turn from your Scizor, with the Air Slash from your Dragonite, always Skulk it. That way you can decide whether the Rotom is specially defensive or physical defensive. Let's say we have our Rotom in versus an opposing Rotom and we Volt Switch. We see it doing 28% damage. Then we can assume, okay, the Rotom is not specially defensive, so he could be physical defensive. But let's say we do 50, we do 20% damage. Then we can assume that the Rotom is specially defensive, just because of the Calcs. So always Calc when you damage the Rotom. That way you can decide whether Mienshao can kill the Rotom or not. Because if the Rotom is actually specially defensive, guys, watch this damage. Boom. Like 78% almost minimal. But if you get off one attack, usually, if you get a Volt Switch off, you can usually already click Close Combat with Mienshao, assuming you have Sandstorm up. Which is also really nice. Another good cog to know is Garchomp, because you do outspeed Garchomp. When you can knock it out. 73.2 is the minimal. Some are hasty, then you even do more damage. But just assume the Garchomp is Jolly. Just assume like the worst case scenario always. Then 73.2. Like if he's below 75%, you always go for close combat on it. Cannot do anything. You gotta know if he's not Choice Scarf though. But those are some pretty important cogs. I should also know that if you are facing a Chansey with max defense, that there might be a possibility that you don't knock it out if they don't have rocks up. Like it's a 62.5% chance to knock out a full HP Chansey. Blissey will always die, but Chansey could live if he's max HP, max defense. So if you have Sandstorm up, then it's gonna be a kill. He doesn't Calc it with you, but Chansey doesn't get recovery, and you get the extra 6.5% damage off. So that's something to note as well. Just make sure Mienshao can kill something. If you want to run some cogs, do it with Mienshao, because Mienshao is gonna be the main reason of opening up the game for your Pokemon. And it's usually for Scizor, because Mienshao can win games on its own, guys. That's why I prefer Mienshao over Conkeldurr, just because it outspeeds Garchomp. It has access to close combat. With the Regenerator Life Orb, it has really nice longevity, U-turn, a lot of momentum. It has access to Taunt, basically interrupting the momentum from your opponent. But yeah, that's basically the team, guys. I actually had a lot of success with it. You guys could try it out if you want. It's the first time me using especially defensive Dragonite, but I really love the Pokemon. It just helped me out in a lot of situations, and not knowing that you won't lose to Volcarona or Reuniclus is one of the best feelings when you're facing them, because a lot of teams are weak to Volcarona, even though Volcarona is running a pretty low win rate. Volcarona can definitely still be threatening, but Reuniclus, usually the ways I had to deal with Reuniclus was with roaring with Hippowdon, but if they go for Calm Mind and Stored Power, it does quite a bit of damage to the Hippowdon. But Dragonite never has to worry. It has more hazes than Calm Minds, Nasty Plots, any other setup move. So that's also really nice. And yeah, the Heal Bell support in case Scizor gets burnt or something. In case Porygon 2 or Hippowdon or Rotom gets poisoned, you can get rid of it. So it works really well together. You guys will see it in the videos as well. And let's actually, guys, while we're at it, I'm going to open up the statistic page. Check the position below the camera, the webcam. So first off, we have Garchomp. These are the Pokemon that are used in OU. Garchomp has the most usage at the moment. Well, we do have our Porygon, as you can see. For Scizor, we do have our Hippowdon with Fire Fang in case it's Swords Dance, and if it's Choice Banded, then Dragonite could check it as well. Rotom could check it as well, because they are locked into an attack. Conkeldurr, we said we use mainly Hippowdon, but in case it turns out to be bulk up, we do have Dragonite as an extra check with Air Slash. Just don't switch it into Ice Punch or Rock Blast. Just be careful when switching in Dragonite into Conkeldurr. But if Dragonite can come in for free, if you sack something, then it can do a lot of damage with Air Slash and even flinch him if you need to. Rotom Wash. Rotom Wash is basically a combination of how we deal with it. We usually check whether he's physical defensive or specially defensive, because most of the times it's Mienshao killing it. But if Scizor is actually faster, which is most of the times they don't run a lot of speed EVs, then Scizor can do a lot of damage with U-turn. Usually pivot into your own Rotom. We have Pain Split on our Rotom, so if he does weaken it a lot with multiple volts, which we can Pain Split. And if the opposing Rotom is not running Pain Split on itself, then it's even easier to deal with him. But it's usually a combination of Scizor, U-turn, Rotom, Volt Switch, and getting it low enough for close combat Mienshao to kill him. And if you can get it poisoned as well, it's also really nice. Gengar, mainly our specially defensive Rotom comes in on it. It doesn't get 2-hit KO'd unless it specs with Stealth Rocks up. But you rarely see specs. The Gengars these days, they are usually Taunt or a Substitute, like Nasty Plot Substitute or Taunt with combination of Nasty Plot or something, and with Shadow Ball and Focus Blast, which Rotom can live at least 2 up, and then hit it with Volt Switch, weaken it either for Scizor to Bullet Punch. And we also have a Dragonite in the back that's specially defensive that doesn't get 2-hit KO'd and can do a lot of damage with Air Slash. And even Porygon 2 can live Focus Blast and get damage off on it. Hippowdon can live 1 hit and hit him with Earthquake. So we do have our ways of dealing with Gengar, but it can definitely be annoying. Well, Blissey, we have Mienshao, and if Blissey doesn't have Flamethrower, we even have Scizor. And even if Mienshao and Scizor get weakened or faints, we can beat Blissey with a combination of tracing the natural cure, and we basically have to stall it out then. So make sure not to lose Mienshao or Scizor, but if it does happen, we can use Porygon 2's natural cure and combine with Sandstorm damage with some Volt Switch damage, forcing it to heal. And we also have Heal Bell. It's gonna be a long game, but we have our ways in case we do lose Scizor and Mienshao. Ferrothorn, mainly Mienshao hitting it with close combat. If it's full HP and physical defensive, you have to watch out though, because they can live. And if they Gyro Ball or Power Whip you, you could die after your defense drop. Hippowdon does have Fire Fang, at least in my team, which does a lot of damage, 4 times super effective. And Scizor can set up Sword Stances, because Ferrothorn is not gonna touch Scizor, and if you get off with few sources, that U-turn is really gonna hurt. So we have that option. Volcarona, like we said, we have a Dragonite that is eager to face Volcaronas, because with Haze, it can just get rid of all the Fairy Dance boosts, Quiver Dance boosts, and Air Slash is super effective as well. Even with a Quiver Dance up, Air Slash is still gonna do like 40%. Like still a lot of damage. And with Haze and Roost, you never die to Volcarona unless they are running Hidden Power Rise, but they usually don't. It's usually Safeguard, a Fairy Dance, some run Bug Buzz, some run Giga Drain, but mainly those kind of combinations. But if you do face HP Ice, then at +1 at full HP you don't die though, but it becomes really scary. Mienshao, we have our Hippowdon. Scizor can knock it out after some chip. If Mienshao is not running Stone Edge, Life Orb, then Dragonite could kind of deal with it as well. I think Porygon 2, let's actually calc this, guys. Porygon 2 might actually live at full HP, because Porygon 2 is really bulky. I might be wrong though. Yeah, Porygon 2 lives a close combat from full HP from a Life Orb Jolly close combat with our EV spread as well. So if that comes to a late game situation where Porygon 2 needs to tank a hit, it can, and hit it with Discharge. Or if you need more damage, Ice Beam, but Discharge could paralyze the Mienshao as well. What's up next? Oh, we get disconnected for being AFK. Hold up. Hold up, guys. me log in again. Sorry guys. Yeah, I was standing still for a long time, so let's open this again. Let's see. Mienshao. So we have our ways of dealing with Mienshao. We can even speed tie with Mienshao, but mainly Hippowdon. But we have Dragonite in the back, and Scizor could kill it as well, especially if they went for a close combat before Scizor comes in, dropping their defense. And if we get a Switch Dance up, then it's basically game over for Mienshao. Hydreigon. If Hydreigon is substitute, then we have Porygon 2 sitting there. Plus, if Hydreigon is not scarfed, then Mienshao outspeeds it, can get a U-turn or close combats off. But we gotta keep Porygon 2 healthy, because if the Hydreigon is not substitute though, we can bring in our Rotom and just use Volt Switch just to get in Mienshao, because Rotom is not gonna damage it much. But if it is substitute, then Porygon 2 with Ice Beam is your main answer when it does get up as substitute. And basically trying to get Mienshao in for free with either Teleport or Volt Switch from Rotom. Pelliper usually on rain teams. We have Rotom Wash. With Porygon 2, who's really strong against rain team with the combination of Discharge and Ice Beam and can teleport around. And for Pelliper, if it comes in on Air Slash, it's also gonna take a lot of damage, because usually they don't expect Air Slash. They expect it to be they expect Dragonite to be physical defensive. And we can get Hippowdon in on a U-turn. On a U-turn when Pelliper switches in, just to remove the rain as well. Chansey, basically same story as Blissey, but like I said, Chansey could live a close combat from Mienshao from full HP, so just keep that in mind in case it's a counter Chansey or something. Won't expect it, but could be. If you're not sure, if you're at Mienshao against the Chansey and you're not sure whether he's going to stay in or switch directly into a Cofagrigus, you can also just go for Taunt, because Chansey is not going to kill Mienshao, and if they do make the switch, they're still taunted. Kingdra, yeah, like Kingdra is definitely a threat, but Rotom Wash is our main switch for it, so just keep Rotom Wash healthy. If they go for the water attack, you can Pain Split and recover back. If they go for Draco Meteor, you have to switch out though. But they're gonna drop their special. They are going to drop their special attack, but it's also, you have to make it difficult for them to get Kingdra in. Because if you just go Rotom when they get Pelliper in, they can never really U-turn into Kingdra for free. Because if you have Rotom in against the Kingdra, you can always get the Volt Switch damage off, or you can just go straight for Pain Split expecting their attack. Basically, when you're facing Kingdra, just make the plays that doesn't allow Kingdra to come in for free. And that's usually just hard switching Rotom into Pelliper, and that way, if they U-turn into Kingdra, you're not in a bad position. Dragonite, we have our Porygon 2. And even if something happens with Porygon 2, if we weaken it enough, then Scizor can just knock it out with Bullet Punch, because we resist extreme speed. Cofagrigus, we kind of have to beat it down with Mienshao, poison it, taunt it, and weaken it with Volt Switch, Hydro Pump, or Porygon 2. Porygon doesn't care too much about the burn. I'd rather have it burned than poisoned, and we do have Heal Bell, but it cannot use Hex on Porygon 2. But most of the times you need Cofagrigus poisoned. Gyarados, again same story as Dragonite with Porygon 2 sitting there. If it's not Power Whip, we even have Rotom Wash. But most of the times, just keep Porygon 2 healthy and you will most likely not lose, unless Gyarados flinches you like 3 or 4 times in a row. I don't know. Skarmory, we do have a Rotom Wash, which resists everything. Can do a lot of damage with Volt Switch. Defog that has its away. And if we have Stealth Rock up, it cannot even come in on Mienshao if the Skarmory is not leftovers. If it's Rocky Helmet, it's gonna get 2-hit KO when you have Stealth Rock up. And you can even just go for Close Combat and go for like a Ballsy Taunt on the Roost and then U-turn out. Then they're crippled as well, and they cannot... After taking in Close Combat and not being able to Roost, they cannot come in on Close Combat again. Because you can just U-turn, and if they stay in, you just go Rotom. And they cannot go for Spikes or something because they're taunted. Magnezone. So a lot of Magnezone teams are weak to Scizor because Magnezone is usually the counter check to Scizor. If you're facing Magnezone, every bit of damage on a Magnezone matters. Because once it's knocked out, Scizor could have an open field day. But usually, the funny thing is, if the Magnezone doesn't go for Volt Switch, if Magnezone goes for anything else and you get Porygon 2 in, then you trace Magnet Pull and they cannot switch out. And Porygon 2 with his amazing bulk can just beat Magnezone 1v1. Unless Magnezone locks himself into Flash Cannon and gets a bunch of special defense drops. But that's something funny to know. Reuniclus, we have Dragonite, and if it's not HP Fire, and even like you can Haze, switch in Dragonite, U-turn, and basically stall out the recovers. And if it's stored power like Iron Defense, Calm Mind, and Mienshao can just taunt an unboosted Reuniclus. Because an unboosted stored power is only 20 base power. It's not gonna do much even though it's super effective. And U-turn with the Life Orb is still gonna do a lot to Reuniclus. So Reuniclus is usually not a problem. Jolteon. Porygon 2 completely walls Jolteon because it's gonna trace a Volt Absorb, so he cannot Volt Switch, he cannot Thunderbolt. It's immune to Shadow Ball because we are a normal type, and sorry, Hidden Power Ice just tickles Porygon 2. And plus we have Hippowdon as well. Only having to worry about Specs, HP Ice. If it's not Specs, if it's not Life Orbed, like if it's leftovers or something, then Hippowdon always gonna take 2 HP Ices. So Jolteon is usually not a problem as long as nothing happens with Porygon 2. Cloyster, we gotta keep Porygon 2 alive and healthy at all cost because Cloyster at +2 doesn't kill Porygon 2, and then we can knock it out with Discharge. Or we gotta keep Rotom at full HP. I'm not sure if especially defensive Rotom can actually live a +2 Rock Blast, so let's actually calc this. I think at level 100 it does, but I don't know about level 50. So Rock Blast +2. Yeah, we do live as long as we're full HP, even after Stealth Rock damage, because we take leftovers recovery. So if we keep Rotom at full HP, then we still have the chance of living and we can just knock it out with Volt Switch. So we do have 2 answers, and if we weaken it enough, guys, if we weaken Cloyster enough, then Cloyster usually after Shell Smash is at -1 defense. Then Bullet Punch from Scizor can clean up the kill or pick up the kill. If something does happen, if Rotom and Porygon do get weakened and Cloyster tries to set up on something like Dragonite or Hippowdon, then you have to stay in and attack them just to get that damage off. And then you could use the Sandstorm from Hippowdon, like sacking Hippowdon maybe, and get the Sandstorm chip on Cloyster and then try to pick it off with Scizor. But Cloyster is usually not a big problem unless it's King's Rock and flinches your Porygon plus Rotom. Then it could be a problem. Milotic. If Milotic activates the Flame Orb, it might take some time to kill the Milotic. But usually Rotom can come in on it, Volt Switch. You can get Porygon and teleport back into Rotom. Just weaken it down, waste some recovers. If you get it low enough, you can taunt it with Mienshao. We don't have to fear the Scald Burn too much because we can always heal bell the Scald Burn away. But if we taunt it at half HP and it try to recover, then we can U-turn. And if they stay in, we just get Rotom in, Volt Switch. And if we get it low enough, let's actually calc this. I think it does a minimal of 38%, but Just have to see. Mienshao versus Milotic. Let's assume max defense and with the burn. Level 50. Yeah, oh, it does 36.8 minimal. So let's say plus minus 40. It's where you could potentially knock it out with close combat. So if you do get, so let's say if the Milotic is at 70 or 72%, you can just click close combat on the Milotic switch if they try to switch to Milotic, and then you get to it KO'd. And if they're at 80 and you click close combat and you are not confident that you are going to do it KO them, just taunt them. Because again, if we're full HP, we don't care about being burnt from Scald. But that's Milotic. Yeah, and these Pokemon are just by usage, but whatever. Togekiss could be annoying, but Dragonite with Inner Focus cannot get flinched. So let's say if you're facing a Nasty Plot, you can always Haze. Get Rotom in again, Volt Switch, go back to Dragonite, Haze, and stall out their Nasty Plots and Roosts. And if they're not choice cards, if you get them low enough, then Mienshao can pick it up with close combat as well. So yeah, see, Mienshao is one of your most important members because with close, it's just a heavy hitter. It knocks out most things. So here we have Togekiss. Let's say it's like max HP, max speed or something. Then close combat. It doesn't have the fairy type. It's a normal type in Gen 5. Then close combat allows a minimal of 63 to a max HP Togekiss. Oh wait, we just remove. So some are like max special defense. Then we do 70.8, and if they are actually bolt nature, then we do 51.5. Then we still do over half. So just like the Rotom, you gotta know whether he's specially defensive or just max HP or physical defensive like Bolt. But that's basically how we deal with the Togekiss. So Rotom, Bolt switching, Dragonite hazing. If we get it low enough, try to get Mienshao in and just pick it up with close combat. It's gonna be a really long video like this, but it's good going over the meta picks. Starmie, again, we keep our Rotom healthy because Rotom doesn't get to it KO'd by Life Orb Psyshock, even though we're specially defensive, and any special attack we easily live. Can threaten it with Volt Switch if you get low enough. Can Pain Split, and Porygon 2 should also wall. Let me show you guys the calc. Porygon 2 versus Starmie. Like Light Orb, Psyshock doesn't do much. Hydro Pump doesn't do much. Oh wait, this is a different Porygon. So we have to calc our Porygon. Level 50. Yeah, Hydro Pump does a maximum of 40. So it doesn't 2-hit KO us. Even with Rocks up, it's not 2-hit KOing us. Psyshock doesn't do much. Thunderbolt doesn't. We can root stuff. Hit it with Discharge, which does over half. So when facing Starmie, just keep either Rotom or Porygon really healthy, and you should be fine in most cases, unless you get unlucky with freezes from Ice Beams, or Paras from Thunderbolt, or crits, multiple crits. But that's the Starmie situation. Yeah, Starmie does outspeed Mienshao, and most Starmies these days run Hidden Power of Fire, so Scizor has to worry as well, and yeah, Dragonite has to worry about Ice Beam. So it's really up to Porygon and to Rotom dealing with Starmie. Excadrill, if it's outside of Sand, then Mienshao will always kill it with close combat unless it's Focus Sash. Otherwise, we have Rotom Wash. I mean, Excadrill cannot have Mold Breaker, so we are always immune to Earthquake. We are resisting Iron Head. Rock Slide is not gonna do much damage because it's not stabbed. And as long as we hit Hydro Pump, we should do a lot of damage. And in another case, we have Hippowdon, which can knock it out with Earthquake. And if we get Excadrill low enough, Excadrill is not gonna... It's doing about the same damage as Garchomp, maybe a bit more. But Porygon can live a hit and not hit it with Ice Beam for some damage. And Scizor, if you get Excadrill low enough, I believe at minus minimal 20% or something is what's Bullet Punch doing. Like, Excadrill is not bulky, so let's take our Scizor set for example versus Excadrill. Bullet Punch at level 50. Yeah, 22.7 is what we do minimal. So if he's close to 20%, we can still knock it out with Bullet Punch, especially if they're Life Orb. If they are leftovers, then they usually lack the damage to get the 2-hit KO on the Hippowdon after Hippowdon gets weakened. But if they are Life Orb, then just try to get as much chip as possible on it, and then Scizor should be able to knock it out when it's low enough. Rotom Mow, yeah, that one is annoying because it can use Trick. So you in your game have to decide, is Porygon important in checking something? Like, do they have a Gyarados? Do they have a Dragonite or something? If the answer is no, then you can bring in Porygon and let it get tricked on. Otherwise, is Dragonite important? Do they have a Volcarona? Do they have a Reuniclus? Do they have a Lucario? If the answer is no, then you can bring in Dragonite and let Dragonite get tricked. And otherwise, if you know it's not HP fire, if Rotom Mow looks to be the only defogger on the team, then they usually don't have hidden power fire, because then the remaining movesets are usually Trick, Volt Switch, and Leaf Storm, meaning that Scizor can kind of stay in and U-turn, and if they do go for Trick, they're just gonna die to U-turn. And yeah, without the Choice Scarf on Rotom, Mienshao is gonna outspeed it and it's gonna blow him back, because they are usually not running max HP, they're not running defense, and a close combat from Mienshao is just gonna do a lot of damage. Next up, Kabutops. Kabutops is definitely a big threat, guys, but to a lot of teams, because Waterfall in the rain is gonna do a lot of damage. Like, we have a Dragonite, but if they decide to go for Stone Edge, it's gonna be annoying as well. So when facing Kabutops, usually you have to decide, do I need Hippowdon that game? Because Hippowdon can live a Waterfall after he removes the rain. And if they are Choice Banded, then they're locked into Waterfall, then you can switch into either Rotom or Dragonite. But if Hippowdon is important, then you might want to switch in Dragonite. If the rain is not up though, if they don't have a rain, then Porygon 2 can always wall Kabutops, even if he has superpower, and do a lot of damage with Discharge. But versus rain teams, Porygon 2 is usually really important, so you don't want to switch it in when the Kabutops has rain up. And it's usually necessary to keep Hippowdon alive, but if you have Hippowdon at full HP, then in that case, it's usually nice to switch Hippowdon in. Unless you don't need Dragonite that game, then you can bring in Dragonite, because it's gonna resist Waterfall. But yeah, it's basically up to you, and Scizor can, when it's low enough, do some damage with Bullet Punch, because Kabutops is also a rock type, and outside of rain, Mienshao can just knock it out with close combat. It's just, first Kabutops, you just have to play well. And Salamence, we have our Porygon 2 again. If it's a defensive Salamence, we can bring in Rotom, Volt Switch, gain the momentum. If we know his moveset, if he has Air Slash, then we gotta be a bit careful. But if it's Draco Meteor, and it just use Draco Meteor, you can use Mienshao to poison him. You can predict him. You can also predict the Salamence switch and go for Toxic. The moment you get Salamence poisoned, it's basically game over for the Salamence, because then you have so many walls that can deal with it. And if the Salamence has Toxic, later on we can heal Bell. And with Salamence gone, it usually opens up the door for Scizor, because in a lot of Salamence teams, defensive Salamence teams, Salamence is usually the only counter to Scizor. But that's good to know as well. Infernape. Yeah, Infernape is a bit tricky, because Infernape can run so many attacks. If it's mixed, it could run Grass Knot, which knocks out Hippowdon. But if Infernape doesn't have HP Ice, then Dragonite is a good counter to it. If it does have HP Ice, then keep Rotom healthy. Because I don't know if Rotom is actually gonna live. I don't run into a lot of Infernapes. And mostly Hippowdon does. In most cases, Hippowdon does take care of them. But let's say Infernape, Nasty Plot. Let's make it naive. Give it like 60, 96 attack or something. This is usually a mix set. 160 special attack. How much is close combat doing in this situation with a Life Orb? With a Life Orb, yeah, it's still gonna 2-hit KO our Rotom, but if Infernape is a Life Orb, the more chip you get on it, the easier it is for Scizor to knock him out, because Infernape isn't that bulky either. So it's basically the Life Orb Excadrill situation. If you get it low enough, then Scizor, at minimal of 25%, can knock it out with Bullet Punch, and we don't have to fear too much about a Vacuum Wave or Mach Punch, because if Scizor is healthy, it's gonna live it, even at +2. But if it's fully physical, then Hippowdon is gonna deal with it. If it doesn't have HP Ice, Dragonite can deal with it, and even Porygon 2 can live a close combat from a max attack Infernape, so that's good to note as well. And if Rotom is full HP and in against Infernape, it's also pretty free. But Infernape does outspeed Mienshao, so be careful. Infernape is just a bit tricky, but we can definitely deal with it we just have to find out what the set is. So if you're facing Infernape and Hippowdon, for example, is not... If Hippowdon's only job is to deal with Infernape and it's Grass Knot, then what's the point of keeping Hippowdon alive, right? And just get in Hippowdon. When finding out sets, just bring in the Pokemon that is usually least valuable. In team review, I always already decide who's going to be important. And if I get into a tricky situation, I just risk my least useful Pokemon just to find out what their sets are. That's Infernape, Gliscor. We have Rotom Wash with Hydro Pump. In this game, they're usually not specially defensive, so Hydro Pump can knock it out. Mienshao can actually Toxic the Gliscor. So the moment you see Rocky Helmet on Gliscor, they usually don't have a flying type attack. If you don't see a Rocky Helmet, they could be Flying, Gem, Acrobatics, then you have to be careful. But if you see Rocky Helmet, you can Toxic it with Mienshao. We don't have to care too much about Earthquake, because we can just heal it up with the Regenerator ability. We can use Ice Beam with Porygon 2. And if the Gliscor does have Toxic, then it doesn't matter too much, because again, we have Heal Bell for Rotom and for Porygon 2. And Scizor, if the Gliscor doesn't have Taunt, Scizor can even set up on him. Like, we don't get 2-hit KO'd by Earthquake, so we Swords Dance. If they go for Earthquake, we Roost till we live 2 Earthquakes again, Swords Dance again. And yeah, if we get enough Swords Dance, then Bullet Punch will kill it as well. So Gliscor is not too big of a deal for us. Chandelure could be a bit tricky. Could definitely be a bit tricky if it's sub Calm Mind. However, most of the times we bring in Rotom, use the Volt Switch. Since we're specially defensive, we don't die to Energy Ball. And if it's a substitute set, then they usually don't carry Energy Ball. Like, it's usually sub Calm Mind, and with their stabs moves like Flamethrower and Shadow Ball, which Rotom should be able to take. And otherwise, we have Dragonite in the back as well. Basically, same story as Gengar. But it could definitely be a bit tricky, because again, Mienshao doesn't touch in. Scizor doesn't do well versus Chandelure. However, Chandelure gets a bit weakened. Same story as Infernape. Like, assuming there's Scarf or something, right? At a minimal of 23%, we can knock it out with Bullet Punch. So having Sandstorm up as well, helping to get more chip, Volt Switches, those kind of stuff. And Porygon 2 is immune to Shadow Ball and can trace Flash Fire, so even Porygon 2 can kind of shut down Chandelure. So we have a lot of options. usually not too worried about Chandelure. Our Manatone, mainly Hippowdon, because Rotom could get 2-hit KO'd since we're specially defensive from a Choice Band and Flare Blitz. Same to Dragonite. I think Dragonite also gets 2-hit KO'd, but Hippowdon also gets 2-hit KO, but they take Recoil, they take Rocky Helmet. So most of the times I dedicate Hippowdon to their Manatone. And if they don't go for Flare Blitz, if they go for U-turn, you don't take much damage, and they actually take more damage than you are taking. So, and if you can get up rocks versus Darmanitan as well. Plus, if Darmanitan gets low enough, same story with Scizor. Like if it's Choice Scarf Darmanitan, then Hippowdon always comes in, and if it's Choice Bandit Darmanitan, if something does happen with Hippowdon, we have Mienshao outspeeding it and knocking it out with close combat. But Scizor can knock it out at let's put it at level 50, like almost 30, actually 25% with Bullet Punch. And if we get a Swords Dance off in that situation, it's gonna do like 50%. So with Rocks up, like let's say we Swords Dance on a Chansey on a Darmanitan switch and they take Stealth Rock, putting them at 50%, then we can knock him out. So Scizor is definitely a threat even to fire types. That's a big list, guys. That's a big list. Mandibuzz. It really depends on the Mandibuzz set. If Mandibuzz does have Brave Bird, then we use Rotom Wash. If it only has Foul Play, it's a free Toxic on him with Mienshao, because we don't doubt to Foul Play. Scizor resisting Foul Play as well. So once Mandibuzz is usually poisoned, you can Volt Switch U-turn between Scizor and Rotom. Because Scizor can roast, and with the speed we have, we usually outspeed Mandibuzz as well. And Rotom doing super effective damage with Volt Switch. So usually don't have too much trouble with Mandibuzz when facing it. Jellicent, we do have our Rotom, but Mienshao can completely shut down Jellicent as well by poisoning it and taunting it. And if it does have Scald and gets the burn, again, we Heal Bell. It doesn't kill our Mienshao. We Heal Bell the burn away. And once it is poisoned, it's pretty free, bringing in Rotom every time. Volt switching there, that kind of stuff. Maybe bringing in Dragonite again, air slashing it a few times. A lot of options, guys. Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl is usually a Stealth Rock lead. In most cases, leading off with Porygon 2 is pretty nice, because we can just use Discharge on the first turn. And once they attack us, we just 2-hit KO him. Usually don't take too much damage. When facing Aerodactyl, don't lead Scizor, because sometimes they run Fire Fang or Fire Blast, and it's just really risky. Tentacruel can definitely be annoying. You gotta know if it's Mirror Code, but most of the times Rotom comes in, Volt Switches, weaken it. Don't care too much about being toxic, because again, Heal Bell. Mienshao does... Most Tentacruels are specially defensive, and if we use Mienshao, even though Tentacruel resists the attack, most of the times they're specially defensive. So we just still do over half, most times over half. So if we get a few Volt Switches off, then we can close combat it. And Tentacruel cannot even come in on a close combat for free, because it's gonna take a lot of damage. But Tentacruel can definitely be annoying to the team if it uses Toxic Spikes, because it forces us to defog, since we don't want Toxic Spikes stay up on the field, because Toxic Spikes makes Heal Bell useless. Because if we switch them in again, they get poisoned again, so we are kind of forced to defog, especially with Pokemon like Hippowdon and Porygon 2. But we definitely have our ways of dealing with Tentacruel. Yeah. Lucario, it really depends on the Lucario. If it's specially offensive, then Dragonite can kind of wall it, unless it has Dragon Pulse, but that's usually not the case. Usually it's Nasty Plot, Aura Sphere, Dark Pulse to hit Psychic types and Ghost types, and then they have a priority move in Vacuum Wave. But if it's physical, then we have Hippowdon. Hippowdon lives at +2 close combat, knocks it out with Earthquake, so we'll be fine there as well. If it doesn't get a Swords Dance or a Nasty Plot up, then Mienshao can knock it out. To get it low enough, Scizor can live a +2 Vacuum Wave. Scizor can live a +2 Extreme Speed because we resist the attack. But it really depends on the Lucario. So if you're facing a Lucario, you first... most of the times you can kind of guess what kind of Lucario it's going to be based on the team. Are they missing a physical attacker? Are they missing a special attacker? If you don't know, keep Hippowdon and Dragonite healthy as possible. But yeah, it's just basically knowing the set and then you know how to deal with him. Gastrodon, we can U-turn with Scizor, poison it with Mienshao and Heal Bell the Toxic or the Skull Burn away. And then it's basically poison stalling it from that point till it gets low enough. Get a few U-turns in if possible. To the point where most of the times Mienshao knocking it out with close combat. Gastrodon is usually specially defensive, but in case it's physical defensive, then we do a minimal of 54. If it's specially defensive, guys, then it just gets blown back like 81%. That's a lot of damage. Gastrodon, Weavile. So in this game, Knockoff doesn't have to boost the damage and it's only 20 base power or something. So Porygon usually the best counter to it on the team. We do have a Scizor, but it's gonna take a lot from the Choice Banded Icicle Crash. A lot meaning it needs to roost or otherwise it gets 2-hit KO'd. And if they run it together with a Magnezone, it becomes dangerous. Rotom also resisting the Ice type attack. Scizor basically resisting everything, but if they do have something like a Magnezone, then Porygon 2 is usually a good answer. Yeah, Scizor always knocking it out with Bullet Punch, so that'll be fine. And against Weavile, just try to get up rocks. Usually if you trade Stealth Rocks, then it's better for you, because that's the best way of punishing Weavile coming in. Because in that case, you can bring in Scizor on the Weavile and Roost, because if they take Stealth Rock damage, they still get punished, even if they switch out. Metagross. Actually haven't played against any Metagrosses, but most of the times Hippowdon does really well. If they do carry Air Balloon, we do have Fire Fang, which is pretty interesting. Mienshao, if they're not Agility, then Mienshao can do a lot of damage with close combat. Rotom resisting steel type attacks. Even if it's Hammer Arm though, Porygon 2 can still wall it and recover. So I'm not too worried about Metagross. Heracross, basically a worse version of Mienshao, because Heracross is definitely scary because it can claim a kill once it gets up a Swords Dance, but most of the times we go hard Hippowdon and they take burn from Flame Orbs, damage from Sandstorm, take Rocky Helmet Chip. Mienshao also outspeeding him, and after they take all that residual, because usually they need to 2-hit KO Hippowdon, so they take Rocky Helmet, damage 2 times, burn 2 times, Sandstorm 2 times. They're gonna be in range of Scizor. Scizor's Bullet Punch or Close Combat from Mienshao. So usually not too worried about Heracross, but it's definitely a threat that can kill something once it comes in. Swampert. If it's a defensive Swampert, we can poison it with Mienshao. Again, we don't care about being Skull Burn, having the Heal Bell option. Scizor usually outspeeds it, so we get the U-turn damage off when it comes in on Scizor. They don't have recovery outside of leftovers unless they run rest. And yeah, once it's poisoned, guys, it's just a matter of time till it gets low enough, and then Mienshao can just knock it out with close combat. Most Swamperts are usually specially defensive as well, so close combat doing 68, like almost 69. And let's say their max defense, then it's still gonna do almost over 50. So Swampert usually not a problem. Yeah, we keep going lower and lower. I think this is enough. Because we already spoken about the main Pokemon, and these are just most of the Pokemon that are following are UU, but sometimes used in OU or a borderline. So I think this is a good way of ending off. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I think it's a really good team to get high letter with. It does take obviously some skill to use, but you'll see in my videos as well how I play the team. But yeah, Pokepace is gonna be in my Discord server once the video goes live. If you like early access to these kind of things, again, check me out on Patreon, guys. Follow me on Twitch because that's where I'm streaming. I'm going to start the road to top 20, the road to top 10 actually soon, as we hit rank 23. I think we dropped down a bit because we didn't play, and people, yeah, obviously if you don't play, people are going to overtake you. So we're rank 27 at the moment, but I think we can definitely do it. I actually found out in my previous stream that a season actually lasts 3 months. I actually thought it only lasted a month, so I was like, oh no, I need to get it in 2 weeks or something. But yeah, that's that. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more of this kind of content, guys, mainly PvP. And yeah, the team again is in the Discord, like I said earlier. But that's gonna be it, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you're going to try the team, have fun with it, guys. And I hope to see you guys in the next video.